Adam had never felt more out of place in his life. He stood in the middle of the Zora Academy's grand arena, surrounded by towering figures, most of them beings who looked as though they could crush a boulder with a single glance. He had always known that his time at the academy would be challenging, but never had he imagined the scale of it. The Zora Academy was home to the most fierce warriors and brilliant minds of the galaxy, each student coming from a species more powerful and dangerous than the next. Now it was his turn to present his predator, the final project that would determine his future at the academy. For weeks, Adam had been preparing. He studied his alien classmates, observing their creatures. The Gormash, a giant, thick-skinned reptilian species that resembled something out of a nightmare. The Zillith, whose sleek, shadow-like bodies could phase through time itself, making them near impossible to catch. And the Vrex, a giant insectoid species, almost indestructible, with massive claws that could tear through metal like paper. Each student had chosen a terrifying predator, and Adam had been told he needed to do the same. He had thought long and hard about it, pondering what kind of predator could compete with the sheer size and power of the creatures his peers had brought to the academy. But as the day of the presentation arrived, Adam knew that there was only one creature who could show the true meaning of a predator, something small, fast, and capable of thinking on its feet. And so, he made his decision. As the arena filled with the buzzing excitement of his classmates, Adam took a deep breath. He stepped forward, gripping the handle of a small cage in his hands. Inside the cage was his choice, a domestic cat. Felix, his pet back on Earth, had always been a quiet companion, but in the right moment, Adam knew he could become something extraordinary. The other students looked on in confusion. They had expected something fierce, something that would strike fear into their hearts. And here Adam was, presenting a small, seemingly harmless creature. The aliens glanced at each other, some whispering among themselves. Surely this was a mistake. No one had ever seen anything like it in the academy before. How could a cat with its soft fur and gentle eyes possibly compare to the ferocity of the creatures they'd brought? Adam didn't flinch under their curious gazes. He stood tall and said simply, "This is Felix. He is my predator." A murmur swept through the crowd. The professors, alien warriors who had seen countless battles and understood the power of terrifying creatures, exchanged skeptical looks. One of them, a towering Gormesh named Grak, leaned forward, crossing his muscular arms. "A cat!" Grak's deep voice rumbled with disbelief. Adam nodded confidently. "Yes, a predator is not just about size or strength. It's about survival, intelligence, and adaptability. Felix represents all of that." The other students scoffed and chuckled, their skepticism clear. What could a tiny cat possibly teach them about being a predator? Adam set the cage down on the ground in the center of the arena and opened it. Felix stepped out, stretching his legs and blinking in the bright light. The cat looked around, seemingly unfazed by the strange surroundings. Felix was a small, sleek tabby with soft fur and golden eyes that gleamed with curiosity. He wasn't imposing in the slightest. Adam watched the feline with a sense of calm pride. He knew the academy would underestimate him, but Felix was no ordinary cat. His agility, intelligence, and ability to survive in the harshest conditions made him a predator in his own right. The first challenge began, the test of strength. A Gormash, one of the Academy's most feared creatures, was brought into the arena to face Felix. The creature was massive, covered in thick scales and sporting claws long enough to rip a tree apart. Grak the Gormash growled menacingly as he lumbered toward the center of the arena. "Let's see if your cat can survive this," Grak sneered, his sharp teeth gleaming. Felix stood completely still, watching the Gormash approach. The students, expecting a quick end to the challenge, settled in for what they thought would be an easy victory for the beast. But Adam knew Felix wasn't going to fight the Gormash head-on. That wasn't his style. Instead, Felix took a few calculated steps back, his eyes never leaving the Gormash. The creature raised its massive claw, swinging it toward Felix with incredible force, but Felix was too fast. He darted to the side, moving with such speed and precision that the Gormash's attack missed by inches. Felix's tail flicked lazily as he continued to avoid the creature's every strike. The students watched, stunned, as the cat danced around the Gormash, evading each attack with ease. Felix had never been one for direct confrontation. He was a predator of patience and precision. Adam knew this would be Felix's strength. The Gormash, on the other hand, grew more frustrated with each failed strike. The alien's brute force and size were useless against the agility and intelligence of the small cat. After a few more missed attempts, Felix darted forward, nimbly jumping onto the Gormash's back. He didn't fight, didn't scratch or bite. Instead, Felix simply jumped to the creature's blind spot and nimbly climbed over its massive form, dodging the sharp claws that swiped in desperation. With one last quick movement, Felix pushed against a loose part of the arena's structure. The Gormash, so focused on the cat, didn't see the trap. It tripped over its own foot, crashing into the ground with a loud thud. The students gasped. Felix stood atop the fallen beast, tail flicking with indifference as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. The arena fell silent. For a moment, no one knew how to react. The professors, who had seen their fair share of battles, were the first to speak. "Interesting," said one, his voice laced with surprise. "You've used the environment to your advantage. That's something we don't see often." Adam smiled, his heart racing. It was just as he'd expected. Felix wasn't just a predator because of his agility. He was a predator because he could think, adapt, and outsmart his opponents. The next challenge was a test of speed. The Zilith, a species that could phase in and out of time, was the next opponent. The Zilith's sleek body and ability to manipulate time made it almost untouchable. But Adam wasn't worried. Felix had faced challenges like this before. Nothing could move faster than his instincts. The Zilith moved quickly, appearing in one spot, then vanishing and reappearing somewhere else in the blink of an eye. The students couldn't even follow its movements with their eyes, but Felix wasn't fazed. His golden eyes locked onto the Zilith, tracking the slight disturbances in the air and the faintest hints of its presence. The Zilith appeared in front of Felix, prepared to strike, but Felix was already moving. With a quick leap, the cat dodged the attack and landed lightly on a nearby ledge. The Zilith appeared again, its attack missing by mere inches. Felix's agility made the Zilith's abilities look futile. Each time the Zilith phased to a new position, Felix was already there, waiting. The crowd, who had once scoffed at the idea of a cat as a predator, now watched in awe. Felix was outsmarting the Zilith at every turn. The cat's every move was calculated and precise, exploiting the Zilith's overconfidence and reliance on its power. The Zilith was growing desperate. It vanished and reappeared several times in quick succession, hoping to catch Felix off guard, but Felix was always one step ahead. Finally, in an unexpected move, Felix launched himself off the ledge and landed directly in front of the Zilith, forcing it to reveal itself in a split second. The Zilith faltered, and Felix used the opportunity to trap the alien, positioning himself just out of its reach. Once again, Adam had proven his point. A predator didn't need to be bigger or stronger. Felix's speed, agility, and intelligence were all that mattered. The Zora Academy's trials were far from over. Adam, still standing in the arena with Felix beside him, watched as the next challenge was prepared. The students had seen Felix's surprising agility and intellect in the previous rounds, but this time, the challenge would be different. This time, they were testing survival. A large metallic gate opened with a rumble, and the Vrex entered the arena. The crowd fell silent. It was as though the very air shifted with the presence of the insectoid. The Vrex was a sight to behold, towering and nearly invulnerable, with thick, jagged armor that covered its body from head to toe. It had 6 powerful legs, sharp mandibles, and claws that could slice through anything. There was no denying the Vrex's power. It was the perfect predator, but Adam wasn't afraid. Felix, who had been sitting calmly at his side, stretched out lazily, oblivious to the danger that loomed in front of him. Adam knew Felix wasn't going to face this challenge like the others. This wasn't going to be about speed or agility. It was going to be about survival and outsmarting the Vrex, just as he had done with the Gormesh and the Zilith. The Vrex growled, sending a deep, vibrating sound through the arena. Its gaze locked onto Felix, the cat now the target of its unrelenting power. The crowd watched eagerly. They expected the cat to run, to cower in fear before such a formidable foe, but Felix didn't move. Instead, the small creature sat perfectly still, staring back at the Vrex with a calmness that only added to the tension in the air. The arena's announcer spoke, his voice carrying throughout the space. This challenge is not about defeat but survival. Can the predator outwit its foe and escape? With those words, the trial began. The Vrex charged at Felix with terrifying speed, its massive claws reaching out to strike. The ground trembled under the weight of the Vrex's movement. Its approach was calculated, each step bringing it closer to its prey. But Felix, ever the predator, was ready. With a sudden burst of energy, Felix darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the Vrex's sharp claws. The Vrex swung again, its attack missing by inches. Felix didn't panic. He didn't run in fear. Instead, the cat seemed to calculate the Vrex's every move, weaving in and out of the arena with the fluidity of a shadow. The crowd gasped. They had never seen a creature so small move with such purpose. Adam stood quietly watching Felix with a sense of calm pride. He knew his cat wasn't going to win through brute force. Felix had no chance against the Vrex in terms of raw strength, but he had something far more important: cunning. Felix's movements were quick, precise, and deliberate. Every time the Vrex struck, the cat was already moving to a new spot, always staying one step ahead. The Vrex, frustrated and confused, began to lunge more wildly, trying to pin down the small cat, but Felix was too fast. He moved with a predator's grace, never giving the Vrex a chance to land a solid blow. Instead, he led the creature on a chase, using the environment to his advantage. Felix dashed between columns, behind rocks, and over obstacles, forcing the Vrex to follow him into narrow spaces where its large body couldn't move as freely. Adam could hear the murmurs of the audience, their surprise evident. At first, they had thought the Vrex would overpower Felix in an instant, but now it was clear that the Vrex's strength was its weakness. It was slow in comparison to Felix, whose movements were sharp and unpredictable. As the Vrex continued to chase the cat, it grew increasingly agitated. It made a mistake, rushing too quickly and smashing into a large pillar that stood in its path. The force of the collision shook the arena, and for a moment the Vrex was stunned. That was all Felix needed. Without hesitation, Felix sprang into action. He darted toward the Vrex's blind spot, climbing up a nearby stack of crates. The Vrex, still dazed from the impact, swung its claws wildly but missed completely. Felix jumped high into the air, landing on the Vrex's back in a perfect leap. It was the last move the Vrex would ever expect. Felix didn't need to fight. He didn't need to attack. All he had to do was outlast his opponent, and that's exactly what he did. The Vrex tried to shake Felix off, but the cat clung to its back, his claws digging into the tough, armored plating. Felix stayed where he was, allowing the Vrex to tire itself out. Minutes passed. The Vrex's attempts to shake off Felix grew more desperate. The creature's powerful limbs grew heavy and its movements became sluggish. Felix had won. He hadn't fought with strength but with patience. The Vrex, exhausted and confused, could not continue the battle. At last, the Vrex collapsed, its body unable to move any longer. Felix gracefully jumped down and padded away, returning to Adam's side where he sat calmly as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The arena fell silent, the tension dissipating as the realization set in. Felix had won. Adam could see the professors exchanging looks of disbelief. They had expected an explosive display of power, but what they had witnessed was something far more profound. Felix had shown them what it meant to be a predator in a way they hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about size or strength. It was about strategy, endurance, and intelligence. Felix, the small domestic cat, had outwitted one of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy. The crowd erupted into applause, not just out of respect for Felix's victory, but out of admiration for the way Adam had approached the challenge. He had refused to rely on the same brute force that every other student had chosen. Instead, he had brought something different, something that made the other students question their understanding of what it truly meant to be a predator. Felix stood proudly beside Adam, his golden eyes shining as the crowd cheered. Adam couldn't help but smile. He had known from the start that Felix wasn't the typical predator the Academy expected, but he had also known that sometimes the greatest strength lay in the ability to adapt and think beyond the obvious. The professors, still stunned, nodded in approval. "You have shown us something remarkable," one of them said. "It is not the size of the predator that determines its power, but the mind behind it." Adam nodded, his eyes meeting Felix's. The cat seemed to understand the compliment, offering a small, contented purr. The victory was theirs, but more importantly, Adam had proven his point. Felix wasn't just a predator, he was a symbol of something much greater. As the crowd slowly began to quiet down, Adam stood tall, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. He knew there would be more trials ahead, but this victory had been important. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the others that true strength didn't always come in the form of physical power. Sometimes the most powerful creatures were those who could think, adapt, and surprise their opponents. For Adam and Felix, this was just the beginning. They had shown the Academy a new definition of what it meant to be a predator. And from that moment on, they would never be underestimated again. The final challenge was set to begin, and the atmosphere in the arena was electric with anticipation. Adam stood at the center of the grand space, feeling the weight of what had already been accomplished. Felix, the small cat who had outsmarted creatures far larger and stronger than himself, sat calmly at Adam's feet, his golden eyes alert but unbothered by the tension. Adam knew that this final test would be the greatest one yet, not because Felix lacked the ability to face it, but because the opponent this time would be unlike any they had encountered before. The Vrex had been a powerful creature, but the final opponent was something even more formidable. This challenge was to test endurance and skill, a trial of the mind as much as of the body. The host, a tall alien with sharp features, stepped forward and spoke. "This final challenge will test your ability to adapt to a truly hostile environment. Your task is simple. You must survive. The environment will shift, and the predators will become more difficult as you progress. The only rule is that you must not touch the weapons. You must rely on your own skills and intelligence." The crowd murmured, and Adam's heart beat a little faster. He had seen some of the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy face their trials in this arena, but now he and Felix were to face something entirely different. It wasn't about raw power anymore. It was about endurance, wit, and staying calm in the face of an unpredictable challenge. As the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, the ground beneath Adam's feet shifted. The arena changed before his eyes. The bright, clean floor became covered with dark shadows. The lights above flickered, and a dense fog began to creep into the air. The temperature dropped suddenly, sending a chill through the space. The other students who had been watching murmured in disbelief. They had never seen the arena transform like this. It was as though the environment itself was becoming an enemy. But Adam and Felix remained still, their senses sharpened. The fog swirled around them, but they didn't panic. Felix, ever watchful, crouched low to the ground, his eyes scanning the darkened space for any signs of movement. Adam could hear the faintest sounds, the sound of something moving in the shadows. But it wasn't just any sound. It was a predator's sound. Something big was coming. From the fog emerged a creature unlike anything Adam had seen before. It was massive, with the body of a wolf but covered in thick, black scales that reflected the flickering light. Its eyes glowed red, piercing the fog like two burning coals. The creature moved silently but with deadly intent. Its large claws clicked against the floor, a sound that seemed to echo in the stillness. The other students watched eagerly, unsure of what was about to unfold. Could Felix, the small cat, really survive something like this? Could Adam outwit this new creature, which seemed almost unstoppable in its sheer size and strength? But Adam didn't hesitate. He didn't let fear cloud his mind. He knew Felix had faced worse before. The key to survival was staying calm and using the environment to their advantage. Felix's sharp instincts combined with Adam's quick thinking were their greatest weapons. The creature lunged toward them, its claws aimed directly at Felix, but Felix was faster. In a flash, the cat darted to the side, his sleek body slipping through the fog as he avoided the attack. The creature snarled, its jaws snapping shut just inches away from Felix's tail. The crowd gasped at the speed and agility of the cat, amazed at how easily he evaded the predator. Adam stepped back, his mind racing. The creature was fast, but it was not as fast as Felix. He could see that the creature relied on brute strength, and that was its weakness. Felix, on the other hand, was using speed and wit to stay one step ahead. Felix ran in quick, sharp bursts, weaving through the fog and using the shifting environment to his advantage. He led the creature in circles, staying just out of reach. The beast, frustrated by the cat's elusive movements, let out a roar that reverberated through the arena. It was obvious the creature was used to overwhelming its prey with sheer force, but Felix was anything but ordinary prey. Felix's golden eyes gleamed as he glanced back at Adam. There was a certain calmness in the cat's movements, a confidence that only came from knowing exactly how to deal with a situation like this. The arena may have changed, but Felix's focus had not. He was still the same cat who had outsmarted the Gormesh and outmaneuvered the Zillith. He would not be defeated by raw power. As the creature lunged again, Felix leapt into the air, landing gracefully atop a nearby platform. From this higher vantage point, he could see the entire arena clearly. The creature, too slow to follow, stood at the base of the platform, growling and snapping its jaws in frustration. Felix, perched like a predator in his element, was untouchable. Adam watched, impressed by how Felix was handling the situation. He had always known that his cat was special, but seeing him in action like this, working in tandem with his own strategy, made Adam realize just how powerful Felix truly was. It wasn't about brute force or the size of your opponent. It was about being smart, using your surroundings, and knowing when to move. The creature's frustration grew as it clawed at the platform, trying to reach Felix, but it was too late. The moment the creature moved too close to the edge of the platform, Felix pounced, landing on the creature's back. It was a perfect move. Felix's claws dug into the creature's scales, and for the first time the beast seemed stunned. It had underestimated the cat, just as so many had underestimated Adam and his choice of predator. The creature bucked and thrashed, trying to shake Felix off, but the cat held firm. Felix had found its weak spot, the creature's neck, where the scales were not as thick. With a swift movement, Felix struck, not with power but with precision. He had learned the most important lesson of all. It wasn't about attacking blindly. It was about finding the right moment, the right place, and making it count. The creature let out a final, defeated growl and collapsed to the ground, its strength spent. Felix leapt away, landing softly on the floor, as calm and collected as ever. He had done it again. He had outsmarted the opponent with his wit and agility, never once resorting to unnecessary force. Adam stood tall, his heart racing with pride. He had known all along that Felix could do it. The cat wasn't just a predator. He was the perfect example of what it meant to survive through intelligence, not violence. The crowd, who had once doubted Felix, now stood in stunned silence. The professors exchanged looks of disbelief, and slowly the applause began. It started as a few claps, but soon, the entire arena erupted into cheers. Adam and Felix had proven something important. Being a predator didn't mean being the strongest or the biggest. It meant being the smartest and the most adaptable. Adam looked down at Felix, who was now sitting proudly at his side. The cat glanced up at him, his golden eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. They had done it. Together, they had shown the Zora Academy what it truly meant to be a predator. The challenge was over and Adam had won, not with strength, but with strategy, endurance, and trust in his companion. The announcer's voice rang out once more, congratulating Adam and Felix for their victory. But Adam's thoughts were focused on something deeper. He had learned that in a world full of fierce and powerful creatures, it was the ability to think, to adapt, and to surprise that made the greatest predator of all. And Felix had shown them all just that. As the crowd cheered, Adam felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. There were many more challenges to face, many more lessons to learn, but for now, Adam and Felix had proven their worth. And in the eyes of the Zora Academy, that was all that mattered.